All right. Mr. Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're on item number 20 on our regular agenda, and this is going to be out of first five San Benito. We have Barbara here to discuss the introduction of an ordinance amending section 11.11.005 of the San Benito County Code, changing membership requirements for the first five commission.
Good afternoon. Lisa Faulkner's out of town, and with her consent, I'm appearing on this agenda item. It's introduction of ordinance amending the membership requirements for the first five commission. As the board's aware, the first five commission is appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and our San Benito County Code sets forth the requirements for that position. This change only changes the fact that now the members of the commission will be allowed to reside or work in San Benito County instead of just reside in San Benito County. It will open up the pool for people that are able to apply for the first five commission. So I'd like to read the title of the ordinance for the record: an ordinance amending subsection A of section 11.11.005, membership of chapter 11.11, first five San Benito of title 11 of the San Benito County Code. If the board has any questions, I'm available for questions.
Supervisor De La Cruz. Okay. I have one question, and it's not really subject matter. It's kind of a little bit off subject matter. But I thought there was some talk by Lisa of wanting to divest herself of county relationship. Is that going anywhere, or?
It's still proceeding, but it's slowed down in time frame. That we're investigating going independent next year, possibly a year in the future, not in time for this next fiscal year.
Okay. Okay. Supervisor Barris.
Thank you. I sit on the first five commission, and I support it. And what this does is it really opens up more opportunity for us. So, and we discussed it. The commission has approved moving forward with this, and so we ask for your support. Thank you.
It's just the commission members, right? The volunteers on it.
Yes. Yes. As the board may recall, there's certain designated members of the first five commission, and then there's 6 members that are appointed at large from interested segments of the community. So this wouldn't change the people that are designated on the commission, such as like the director of the health director, the health officer. But it would allow a larger member of the community to apply for the at-large membership.
Supervisor Patello?
Yeah, I probably support it as well as Supervisor Barrios. But the only concern I have is there any implications as far as with our other commissions that all of a sudden we get out? I think we would strive to try to get people that live and work in our county to serve, but you know, we got a number of commissions. Are we going to start opening it up to anybody who wants to be on it, or is that was a concern or discussed when you discussed that first five?
No, I also sit on the Behavioral Health Board, and I know that we have some members on the Behavioral Health Board that are not, they don't reside in San Benito County, but I think we have one that resides in Santa Clara County, and but because they either have consumers that have services here, that get services here for whatever reason or had at one time, then they are allowed to be on the board. So this is not an unusual, it's not a precedence, I don't believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara, but I believe that
and I believe Workforce Investment Board.
Pardon?
The Workforce Investment Board
Also?
Okay, all right then.
Yeah, so there is some other boards that allow people that work here to be on them.
And I did check with the state statute. This is a requirement that's just a local requirement instead of in-state law when they talk about, when the state statute talks about appointments to the commission.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
More involved in like in the housing association, the YMCA, all those activities that actually those funding can be directed to other kids besides 0 to 5. But if that's the wish of the board, I'm out for it to go forward.
And for clarification on that, you're absolutely right that sometimes other members of the family are served, but it's really difficult to take the children away from the family. So when we try to provide services, for instance, in their home where somebody goes in and brings books to the children, and there are other family members, so they don't get excluded. They just become a part of the unit, but it's really zeroed in to 0 to 5. But the family certainly is a part of gets served in some indirect fashion.
Any other questions of the board members? Open it up to the public. Anybody from the public like to address the board on this item? Seeing none, what's the wishes of the board?
I will make a motion to approve staff's recommendation. Oh, thank you. I'll repeat that. I'll make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Second it.
We have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes 5-0. Mr. Espinoza?
We're on item number 21 this afternoon, and this is going to be out of our Health and Human Services Department. We have James Writing Sword here, our Health and Human Services Director. The discussion item today is going to be with regards to Health and Human Services and the reorganization of it. So again, we have Jim here to elaborate more on that as well as answer any questions.
Let's just go up here now. Do I do something here? Well, hopefully it's coming up.
It takes a little while for it to
Okay.
warm up.
Well, let me
I've
just
seen it.
comment while it's coming up. Over the last 6 months, we've really taken a hard look at the entire agency. What we're bringing forward to you today is Phase 1. We'll probably, and in Phase 1, we're talking about eligibility services, social services, and departmental support. In Phase 2, once we complete that analysis, we'll come back and discuss with you community service, work development, and public health, including a discussion of public health functions, environmental health, and emergency medical services. So today we're doing Phase 1. Just a couple of things before we get into the presentation. First of all, the Health and Human Services Department relies in a very small measure on county general fund. I think in this next year's budget, the county general fund portion of our entire budget will be about 1.5% to 2%. So almost all of our funding comes from federal sources, state sources, fees, and what we now call program realignment, which is really a shift of local funds to a state funding source. So what we're presenting to you today, the funding for the requests today all come from non-county general fund. We're not making any request for any county general fund. We're responding in this presentation to a couple of reviews that have been done by the State Department of Healthcare Services of our Medi-Cal program, which resulted in us in them telling us that we needed to have a corrective action plan. So a significant portion of what we're talking about today deals with that corrective action plan. We also have looked at our total allocations. We get allocations for different programs. For example, we get an allocation for Medi-Cal. That allocation is federal and state dollars. We are authorized to spend up to that allocation. For a variety of reasons, the agency at least for this year, is not spending up to those allocations. So what occurs is that a portion of that allocation before the end of the year is returned and reallocated to other counties. So one of the things that we want you to understand is that we're doing all of this within total allocations, and we're having some serious discussion about, what are our needs and to what extent can we avoid returning parts of our allocations back to other counties. You'll also see in this presentation a reorganization of what I'm calling the departmental support activities. This has to do with basically three functions in the department. One is our fiscal function, two is an administrative function, and three is a human resources function. You may or may not be aware that in our human resources, about 65% or 70% of all our transactions are not done with county human resources. They're done with a statewide consortium called Merit System Services. They cover most of our social services, eligibility services programs. So there's a great deal of work that needs to be done within the department in order to keep up with that. And in discussions with the county administrator, we are proposing today that part of that work is assumed within the department. So that's kind of a background on it, and let me just kind of run through the slides for you. So this is phase one for eligibility services. We currently have 46 positions in our eligibility services division. Under this proposal, we will increase those positions by 10 positions to 56 positions. Almost all of those positions are paid for out of Medi-Cal funding, which is federal and state funds. 6 of those positions are in response to the state's request for us to do a corrective action plan. When we were asked to do a corrective action plan, we went to the state and we said, well, here's what we can do. And they looked at it and they said, that looks good. And then we said, well, that's going to cost $500,000. Are you willing to put that money up? And they said, yes. So we're proceeding on that basis. I'm hoping that these positions will eventually morph into a what we will call a program integrity unit, so that we can begin to, in a very systematic way, begin to look at the quality and of our work and how well are we doing, and begin to build corrective action into what we do in advance, as opposed to waiting for someone from the state to come and tell us that we haven't done things well. The other positions are primarily a result of caseload increase, mostly in the Medi-Cal program, and you'll see that as we go along. Our eligibility caseloads since last July have increased by 13.58%, and this is as of the end of January. The major increase in terms of, real numbers has occurred in the Medi-Cal program, where we've gone from about 3,900 cases to close to 5,000 cases, and I understand that today we're probably over 5,000 cases, and we expect to be within the next year or two at about 6,000 cases. This is the narrative, explains, what we're doing, the analysis behind it, the citation of where we're getting the funds from and why we're doing that. So that's included as part of your package. This is the fiscal analysis. You can see that for the changes that are not related to the corrective action program, the cost is $399,000, And you can see that none of that is coming from County General Fund. In fact, the major portion of that, $257,000, is coming from the Medi-Cal program. This is the fiscal analysis on the corrective action plan that we submitted to the state, which includes staffing. The total for 1 year of staffing was a little over $400,000, which they have approved. We expect this year to spend about $109,000 of that. And then we also included some startup costs that they also approved in the neighborhood of about $38,000. So, may I pause there and see if there's any questions on that section?
Are there any questions, anyone from the board? I guess, Jim, you're saying you're going to fill 10 positions for $500,000?
No, we're going to fill 6 positions for $500,000, and we're going to fill the other positions with the other $400,000.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Jim, we're going to hire within, or we're going to go out and recruit direct positions?
We will need to go out and recruit. However, when we go out and recruit, we always make that available to staff and encourage staff who have been with us for a while in lower positions to apply for those positions.
Is there, I don't know of a specific individual, but this is more of a general term statement. Is there funds available to trained employees who we have right now to allow them to apply for these jobs?
The general answer to that is yes. And when we get to the third section of this, I'll spend a little bit of time focusing on what we want to do around staff development.
Yeah, because if you don't, this
Yeah.
is, for example, you got an employee who's at the level 3.
Yes.
And there's a position at level 1 open. If there's just
Yes.
some of that training, they don't have it. It just doesn't make sense. There's no
Yeah.
that does not foster hire within.
I
So,
could not agree with you more, and I think that's something that we need to work on, and we plan to work on that.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, to the extent that, when people come to work for us and when I meet them, I tell them what a grand career this has been for me, okay? And I say to them pretty much from the first day, just think in 30 years you can retire, and you can have a wonderful career. And they all kind of look at me and smile. But the fact is, if we train them, if we give them a reason to be engaged in what we're doing, then they're going to stick with us, and we're going to be, growing our own, so to speak. Okay? The Social Services Division, in this division, this is currently what we have. We have 5 social workers in in-home supportive services, IHSS, adult protective services, and child protective services. We're proposing to add a 6th position here for in-home supportive services. Again, here is the cost, and here is the explanation behind that. Basically, by adding another position based upon the current changes in how things are funded in-home supportive services for us, there is no county cost. It's picked up by the federal and state government.
Actually, Mr. Chair, Jim, isn't there a MOU that we have to provide?
Maintenance of effort.
Isn't
Yes,
there-
and we meet that maintenance effort every year. This is over and above that maintenance of effort, and anything above that maintenance of effort is picked up by the federal and state government. Okay? The agency has not hired an IHSS social worker since 2007, and this is what the caseload looks like since 2007. We've gone from 300 cases to close to 550 cases. So the need is there to bring the staff in. Okay, so that's social services. That's any other, may I pause there and see if anybody has any questions? Okay.
Okay.
The Departmental Support Division, this is what currently looks like. When I came in, I read a lot of the history about what has happened within this division, and one of the things that I feel that needs to happen is that we need to build in some focus and accountability into the division so that we are on top of things. So we are proposing here to create 3 sections within that division. One will be a staff services manager, which will be over our administrative operations. Those operations are the operations that deal with contracts, facilities, deal with statistical reports and things like that. Anything of a non-fiscal administrative function. The second will be a departmental fiscal officer, and this one I think is really important to us in order to really stay on top of our fiscal operations. We're also, I think you'll note here, we've taken a look at the ERP system, and for our department, we've made an assessment, and we've discussed this with the county auditor, that it would be really good to have somebody who stays on top of that ERP system within our large department. And so we're proposing a position to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
Getting back to the fiscal officer, how are you have that in place now within the current organization?
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. There's a gentleman in the department who is a CPA who I would like him to be our fiscal officer.
Okay. Do we have him contracted, or is he an
No,
employee?
he's an employee.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Currently an employee.
Was he the one who used to be in the auditor's office?
I believe so.
Okay, I know who it is. Okay.
Okay? But I've had long talks with him, and I'm very satisfied with his knowledge and his background and his experience. He's able to answer my questions, and since I started as a fiscal person, my questions can sometimes be a little probing.
Mr. Chair, how much grade up is that going to go from accountant 3 to fiscal officer?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you know?
It is a jump. It's a fairly significant jump in that respect. But in terms of what it looks as though is needed to run that fiscal operation, there's multiple colors of money that go through that department. There's state, there's federal funds. The county's maintenance of effort is, I don't want to say insignificant because it's very significant to your board, but in terms of percentage-wise, but within those state and federal dollars, you say 2 sources, and there's a rainbow of colors of different monies and rules that come with all of those monies, and the oversight of keeping track of, number one, not being able to utilize your full allocation and not returning money to other counties so that you can use it for services here, as well as not getting in a position where that person, and I don't want to talk for the operation here, overexpends funds in one area that would put the board at risk, per se. So
Okay.
you may want to elaborate on that. I could calculate that.
You're
It's-
creating 2 additional accountant positions.
No, there would be a reallocation of a current staff member.
Okay, well, you have 1 current, and then you're going to create 3 bubbles. I mean, and the current one's going to fill one of those bubbles.
Okay, there are 2 people,
Yeah.
and there are 3 positions. So 2 would be moved to new positions. 1 would need to be
Well,
filled.
one of them is going to be the manager of the 2.
Actually, I think all 3 would report, based on this, to the director to avoid that silo. It spreads that out so that he has direct access to the contracts, to the fiscal, and to the human resources function.
I mean, Chairman Munzers and I serve on the audit committee, and the discussions we just had about fiscal messes just tells me this is a good thing, Jaime. Leave it alone. It's a good thing.
Yes.
It's a good thing.
Okay? And then the third is staff services manager, which on your thing says personnel option. This is going to be human resources. This is where we're going to, want to work really a lot on what we're doing about human resources, including looking at our options for training for staff. And there are a number of options that we have. For example, we have a relationship with UC Davis, for example, and their training programs. And so we've had some discussion with them as an example of what would it take for you to come in and provide training for new eligibility workers. And we're having those discussions with them to see if we can kind of move in that direction. So I think there's a number of things that we can do to strengthen our human resources and our staff development functions in the department within this organization. Again, here's the logic, the program analysis behind it, and how we plan to separate out the operations within this particular division. And I think we're finished. So, once again, we're asking for your approval to move forward with this. If we do receive your approval today, we will then begin working with the county administrator's office on implementing things, and we will be back to you with a phase 2 around community services and work development and around public health and options within the public health division.
A question and a comment, Mr. Chair. Question is, it seems like you're adding up at the management level.
Yes.
And are you prepared to face the reaction from the rank and file who's going to say later on, well, we haven't gotten a raise, blah, blah, blah. There's an array of concerns. You're prepared to answer those questions, and you feel comfortable you can justify those responses?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And this has been a pretty open discussion within the agency.
Okay.
Tried to let everybody know what we're doing as we're going along.
Jim, all of this is, I know that even before the review, you were already gearing up to making some changes, necessary changes. And you talked about getting an additional funding.
Yes.
And I'm assuming that's coming from the state,
Yes.
not the federal. Now, at what point are we guaranteed those funds before, we're moving ahead with these decisions possibly, but are we guaranteed that money in some fashion prior to this?
Well, the answer to that is everything that we have done is within current allocations. We don't expect our allocations to go down next year. We, in fact, expect our allocations to go up. The second answer is if we manage the department to the allocations, if we have a downturn in allocations, or, for example, a downturn in program realignment, I think it's on the agency to manage that process. And let's just say we had a 10% downturn in program realignment. That means that we'd probably be looking at doing some kind of adjustments within the agency to deal with that. In my experience, and I think the same thing would occur here, you have a natural turnover that occurs every year, so you can manage within that turnover if you have to. And that's what we've done before, and I think that's what we would be able to do here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
The human resource operations side of it, I see you have down coordination with county HR, labor negotiations. How is that going to work seamlessly?
I've had lots of discussions with Georgia about this.
Okay, what this is a way to leverage some of certainly the county human resources needs that come from Jim's department with respect to not using additional county general funds.
Okay, I
There's a
understand.
number of ways
Okay.
to do it. You can add positions here.
Good,
and
okay.
pay for them through your county general fund. We can move some things
okay.
and do them a little different. There is a hand-in-glove coordination. That function would not be independently doing labor negotiations with county-wide bargaining unit kinds of things. There may be some additional small departmental issues that move forward, but this isn't an unusual structure in the health and social services. This is done in a number of counties kind of thing, and there is very much a hand-in-glove relationship, if that helps.
Yes, it does. And then I have one last question.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if it's Jim or Ray, but is there a state agency that can come in and say our public safety is woefully understaffed and they'll throw a $500,000 or $1 million our way?
You know, that's an interesting question. And I go to a number of meetings, and one of the meetings I went to a couple of months ago included the state agency, I forget the name of the state agency that deals with jails. Yeah. And the whole discussion, there was about 8 different state agencies there talking to county agencies like ours. And the whole discussion was, how can we work together to make things work better? And how can we share funds and things like that? So I think there's some openings for us to begin to have those kind of conversations. We've been working locally, for example, on Medi-Cal eligibility at the jails. And we've worked out, I think, some pretty good protocols. But I put forward some questions to the state saying, well, if I have a probation officer over here, you know, working at the jail, who is explaining to a person who's in the jail what their options are around health insurance, not while they're in jail, but when they get out of jail, is that an expense that I can begin to cover under Medi-Cal? So I think there's, and I brought this up in the AB 109 committee, I think there's ways for us to begin to look at. What I think we need to clearly understand is, since 2011, with the new program realignment, since 2014 with the Affordable Care Act, things have changed. The environment has changed. And there's a lot more, how shall I say it, discretion that we can have in terms of how we do things in local communities than I've ever seen before. And I think that's a good thing, because I think we need to have those discussions. If I can help you put sheriffs on the street, I'd like to do that.
I'll take you up on it. If there's no other questions from the board, I'll open us up to the public. Anyone from the public like to address this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Actually, Mr. Chair, first question, maybe Georgia or Jim. If funds do drop, and I kind of support Supervisor Barrios' concept that, you know, money's not always constant, especially from the state or the federal government. I believe that 100%. Do you have a plan in place in which you will not take it from the rank and files, but you will make the corrective actions where the managements are being hired right now, the old accounting saying first in, first out to go? Is that a method you're going to have in your shelf down the road if the funds do drop?
That would always be part of a plan of moving forward, yes. Because my position is that the management of the department is here to support the staff, get the job done with the community.
I just don't want to hire a manager and then down the road funds are cut. We lay off a rank and file and then the manager goes down there and does the job. I just don't like that.
As far as we can see right now, you know, in the next 4 or 5 years, you know, we are, and if you look at the legislative analyst reports and reports out of the state finance, there seems to be a growth particularly in our program realignment funds, where it looks like they're going to grow 2 to 3% every year for the next 4 or 5 years. So to me, 4 or 5 years in the business is long-term planning. And if we can keep looking out and kind of watching those things, and if somebody starts predicting a downturn in the economy, you know, then I think that we can begin to react to that sooner.
And then in reference to our chairman's questions about law enforcement, not only should we, I mean, I think I talked to you about that, is that when an inmate walks out of that door, that jail,
Yeah.
they should have a health insurance card ready in their possession.
Absolutely.
But I think we should also give it to them once they're inside, because that jail budget is also financing those medical expenses too.
Well, the federal guidelines on Medi-Cal do not allow us to reimburse for jail expenses for medical services, except in a very narrow sense. And that is when they actually have to leave the jail and go to a hospital. Then we can do some reimbursement. But that's a federal guideline, and it's something that I keep bringing up in meetings that I'm at is, isn't it time for us to revisit that, because that guideline was put in place in 1964.
I'll make a motion to approve the classifications, position changes, and actions as described by a staff report and attachments, and approve the budget augmentation with no use of general fund, county general fund.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much. The agency and the staff appreciate your support.
Looks like a good plan.
So how to close this out? Okay.
I'll do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're on item number 22 on our agenda, and we have our interim HR director here, Georgia Cochran, to discuss with your board CalPERS exemption. So, Georgia.
Had CalPERS allowed, we'd have placed this agenda item on the consent calendar, but as a matter of history with the new legislation that became effective January 1st of 2013 that implemented the new retirement plans, it also placed restrictions on hiring back retired annuitants. And one of those restrictions was that you had to sit out 180 days prior to being used in another public agency, another CalPERS agency. For example, in this case, we have our welfare fraud supervisor who retired effective as of December 30th. And the 6-month period would not be up until June 30th. So this is a request to allow the HHSA to bring her back on a limited intermittent basis between next week and the end of June, although they predicted maybe a couple of weeks, but just to kind of assist the new person that they have hired. They have the person on board, but there's always a few little nuances. So it's not to do the work, it's just to provide some guidance and some training, and here's how I handled this and those kinds of things. But CalPERS does require an extensive resolution, as you can see, as well as what I've given you is a sample personnel action form. We will actually have to send the exact personnel action form as a copy, as an attachment to this resolution. So that's what this is just a request, the formal request, which is required by your board for an exemption to the 180-day rule. Questions?
Would she be collecting pension credit on this time?
No, there's no CalPERS payment. She will get her retirement, whatever she is currently getting. And this, again, if you look at the path, this is, we're not permitted to hire a person above the top step or below the bottom step. This is a hire at step C in accordance with your personnel rules. But there are no CalPERS payments. She does not receive any additional credits for that.
So she'll be at 1099.
Pardon?
Will she be at 1099?
No, she's
Get a
on the
W-2.
payroll, but there are no CalPERS costs whatsoever. And again, this is a pretty short, probably 2 to 3 weeks, I think is what was indicated to me, but pretty intermittent there for a very short period.
Anybody from the public like to address this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. What's the wishes of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve per staff recommendation.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Passes 5-0.
I would like to just add very briefly, you probably will not see many of these over the course of time. This was kind of a specialized position. There isn't another person there to help, so that's the reason you may occasionally see one of those. They're generally very specialized types of requests.
So can we get that in writing?
CalPERS monitors
we-
that, and that is their requirement.
I think we had 2 or 3 already who fell through the scope, so, okay.
Not with this new law. This is very, very strict and very specific. I wouldn't want to speak to anything else that may have happened.
You know, the old saying, exemption to the rule, okay.
Mr. Espinoza?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we're on item number 23 in our agenda. We have our interim planning director here, Byron Turner, and he's going to be discussing with your board the approval of reimbursement agreement with Piscinas Rocks LLC to fully recover county costs. So, Byron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Piscinas Rocks LLC is applying for a conditional use permit to operate a quarry on the property that's commonly known as the Piscinas Ranch. After approval of the reimbursement agreement, the county will retain a consultant for the environmental document. It's going to be an environmental impact report, an EIR, and other consultants as necessary for processing the project, which will be a use permit and a reclamation plan in a timely and efficient manner. So this will allow me to engage the consultant and get them working on this project. There will be a minimum of 3 public hearings before a decision can be made on this project. This is just simply to hire the firm who can handle the environmental document. So it is recommended that the board approve the reimbursement agreement between Piscinas Rocks LLC and San Benito County to fully recover county costs to review and process a conditional use permit and reclamation plan, and authorize the chair to sign the agreement on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. I'm available for any questions.
Are there any questions on the board? Byron, where the 3 public hearings, there'll be, what, 2 at the Planning Commission and 1 at the Board of Supervisors? Or?
One will be a environmental scoping meeting.
Oh, okay.
One will be then the public hearing on the EIR, and one will be Planning Commission.
Okay.
And that's at a minimum.
Okay. I have concerns about this project because of its location and where the trucks will be coming out onto Highway 25, basically coming between 2 blind curves. Is that going to be?
That is something that
That
will
will
be
be
addressed
definitely
as
looked at,
as
correct.
part of the application and part of the traffic analysis that'll be prepared for this project.
Yeah, okay, okay. All right.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Rivas?
And Byron, as far as like a time frame, do you know when?
Typically, these things take at least a year to between now and when you'll be hearing about it. It could take longer, depending on what kind of species the biologists find out there, or any other, unknowns which we haven't gotten to dig in and see yet.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
If there's no other questions from the board at this time, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anybody from the public that'd like to address this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the reimbursement agreement between Piscinas Rocks LLC and San Benito County to fully recover county costs to review and process a conditional use permit and reclamation plan, and to authorize chair to sign agreement on behalf of the Board of Supervisors.
Have a mo-
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, Brian.
Mr. Chair, County Council, do we need to state the number, permit number? No, we don't, right? Okay.
Okay. Mr. Espinoza?
All right. We're on our last regular agenda item today, item number 24. This comes out of our Public Works Department. We have our Assistant Public Works Director here, Armand Nizami here to give you a status update on Cienega Road, the realignment process and or project, and a couple things that are that the Public Works Department's going to do next week. So wanted to inform the board on that.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. What I have before you is just an announcement for construction of Cienega Road, and the fact that it's being scheduled for completion end of this week. And we would like to, staff would like to invite board members, public members for a ribbon cutting ceremony on Monday, 21st. And I think it'll be a good event.
Time?
And actually that we have contacted Chamber of Commerce, and they're going to assist us on this. So the ceremony is going to be actually at 11 o'clock on Monday.
Aman, I just want to thank staff for all the work and diligence that went into this project. I know we have 2 housing developments that paid into this.
True.
And they were getting antsy about when it was going to happen. They were getting to the point of thinking it was never going to happen. So
Exactly.
I just want to thank staff for staying on it and getting it done. Any other questions? Okay. Is there any comment from members of the public? Seeing none, I think this was just informational.
That's information.
Yeah, so again, thank you, Aman.
Thank you.
For it.
Where is, oh, wait.
With that, we are going to adjourn to closed session. County Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Board of Supervisors will now adjourn in a closed session to discuss agenda items number 25, 26, and 27 on today's agenda. Agenda item number 25 is to meet in closed session to confer with the county's labor negotiators. The agency designated representatives are Danya Torres Wong, Ray Espinoza, Joe Paul Gonzalez, Melinda Casillas, Allison Hauk, Georgia Cochran, and Mark Gregerson. The employee organizations involved are Management Employee Group, Institutions Association, SEIU Local 521, General Unit Employees, SEIU United Long-Term Care Workers Local 6435, Law Enforcement Management, and the Deputy Sheriff's Association. The authority to meet is California Government Code Section 54957.6. Agenda item number 26 is to meet in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B to discuss public employee dismissal/release. And finally, agenda item number 27 is closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1 for a public employee performance evaluation of the County Council.
Mr. Espinoza?
Yeah, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but there was one item that Armand was going to talk to your board about, is about the naming of the highway or Cienega Road and the north and south issue. I don't know if we
Yeah, I
can-
apologize. I meant to mention also about the renaming of the road, which is going to come before you on future board meetings.
Yep.
Then
So what's
that's
the
all I
name?
have.
What's the name?
Would anyone for the public like to address the board before we proceed into closed session? Seeing none, we'll adjourn to closed session.
Barrios.